Hello and welcome. This story is based on real events from a long-time subscriber and has not been altered or fictionalized in any way. I hope that you will enjoy and find it chilling and unsettling, leaving you on the edge of your seat. I love nothing more than a good scare, and I hope to bring a little bit of that excitement and fear to you through my stories. So sit back, get comfortable, and let me take you on a journey through the dark and twisted world of horror. I hope you enjoy the ride. This story happened to my wife and I years ago. We had a neighbor who went out of town for a few weeks and they asked us if we could watch their house while they were away. We agreed to do so, and we made sure to keep an eye on the property and make sure everything was in order. While we were staying at the house, my wife had a scary experience that stayed with her for life. Before I start the story, let me introduce you to my neighbor. Meet the family across the street. They are a family of 5 with 2 loving parents, 2 energetic boys aged 8 and 6, and a sweet little sister who is 3 years old. From what we have seen, they seem to be a close-knit family who values kindness and respect. They were always on the go, participating in various activities and sports, and we often see them spending quality time together as a family. We had the pleasure of getting to know them a little bit, and they are always friendly and welcoming. It's always nice to have good neighbors, and we were grateful to have this family living across the street from us. From what we have seen and heard, their 3-year-old daughter Emily had always been a bit of a quiet and sensitive child. She had always been prone to getting sick, but her parents had always assumed that it was just because she was a bit delicate. As a result, they didn't pay too much attention to her frequent colds and flu-like symptoms, believing that she would eventually grow out of them. Emily had always been a bit of a dreamer and had a vivid imagination, so they didn't think much of it when she would come home from school with a new cold or the flu. They just assumed that she was more susceptible to getting sick because she was a bit more sensitive than her brother. They never took her symptoms too seriously, and often just gave her some over-the-counter medicine to help her feel better. Emily was a sweet and loving child, and she didn't want to worry her parents, so she rarely complained about feeling unwell. She tried her best to go about her daily life as usual, even when she didn't have the energy or strength to do so. One day something strange started happening. Emily began seeing a little girl in their house. At first she thought it was just her imagination playing tricks on her, but the ghost seemed so real and became more and more frequent. Emily was in her bedroom when she first saw the ghost girl. She had just finished her homework and was getting ready for bed. She was sitting on her bed, flipping through a book of fairy tales that her grandmother had given her, when she saw a faint figure out of the corner of her eye. When she turned to look, she saw a young white girl with long hair that reached down to her knees. The girl was translucent and seemed to be hovering in midair. Emily froze, unsure of what to do. The ghost girl looked at Emily with big dark eyes, as if trying to communicate something to her. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine, and then the ghost girl was gone. She screamed, startled by the sudden appearance of the ghost. Her parents came rushing into the room, worried about what was wrong. Her mother rushed in, looking around the room for any signs of danger. "I saw a ghost," she cried, still shaking with fear. "The ghost was right here, in my bedroom." Her parents looked at each other, not sure what to make of Emily's story. "There's no such thing as ghosts," her father said gently. "It was probably just your imagination." But Emily knew what she had seen. She knew that the ghost girl was real and that she was trying to tell her something. She just didn't know what it was. Emily's father was very concerned that night after Emily told him about the ghost girl. He had always been a bit superstitious and believed in the power of certain rituals to ward off evil spirits. Because of that, he went to his bedroom and came back with a red string. "I'm going to tie this red string on your hand," he told Emily. "It will protect you from any evil eyes or spirits." Emily was a bit skeptical, but she let him tie the red string around her wrist. It was a bit tight and uncomfortable, but Emily didn't mind. She was just happy that her father was taking her seriously. "That should do the trick," her father said, patting her head. "You'll be safe now." Emily smiled and hugged her father, grateful for his concern. She hoped that the red string would work and that the ghost girl would leave her alone. She drifted off to sleep that night, feeling a bit more secure and protected. As the days passed, Emily's health continued to decline. She became weaker and weaker, and the ghost girl seemed to be with her all the time. Emily told her parents about the ghost, and they did everything, but they could not pinpoint what was making her sick. A few weeks later, doctors gave Emily and her parents the devastating news that she had terminal cancer, that they realized the gravity of the situation. Emily had only a few months to live, and there was nothing that could be done to save her. Emily was heartbroken. She had always dreamed of growing up and experiencing all the things that life had to offer. She had never imagined that she would be faced with such a tragic end. As the little girl lay on her deathbed, her parents sat by her side, tears streaming down their faces. They knew that their time with their beloved daughter was running out, and they were desperate to do anything to make her feel better. My wife was there with the family when Emily took her last breath. After Emily said her last goodbye to everyone there, she turned to her parents, and her parents held her hand and whispered words of love and comfort. Suddenly, the little girl sat up and pointed towards the dark corner of the room. "Mom, Dad, she's here," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My ghost is here, standing right next to you and staring at me. Her long tangled hair is blocking half her face, Mom. Her skin is pale, and her face is twisted and distorted." After she spoke those words, the air was heavy and the room felt colder than it should have. My wife's heart was racing and her hands were shaking as they all slowly turned to face the corner Emily was pointing to. She was frozen in place, unable to say a word to them. She knew that if she took her eyes off of Emily, she would see the ghost. Emily's uncle got up and started yelling around the room, telling whatever it was in the house to get as far away from Emily as they could. They sung a prayer together and watched Emily as she took her few last breaths. My wife was terrified and didn't know how much longer she could stand it. This terrified my wife badly, and she had nightmares later on. The family was devastated when Emily died. They knew that they had lost a special and beloved member of their family, and they were heartbroken. Because of this, they decided to take a trip out of state for a week to spend time together and try to heal from their loss. This is where my wife and I come in. So before they left, the family asked my wife and I to check on their house occasionally and water the garden. We agreed, happy to help in any way we could. The family showed us around, and as we walked through the house, we couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. It was hard to believe that Emily was gone and that the house would never be the same without her. But we knew that the family needed this time together, and we were happy to do our part to make it happen. As we left the house, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We turned to look, but there was no one there. We shrugged it off and headed back home, hoping that the family would find some solace and healing on their trip. It was during the summer, and so the garden needed water every day. We were busy, so the only time we could water their garden was during the evening. As my wife and I took care of the family's house while they were away, my wife started to feel like someone was always staring at her every time she went to water the garden. She couldn't see anyone, but she could feel someone watching her. She would glance around, trying to see if anyone was there, but there was never anyone in sight. She started to get anxious and jumpy, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching her. At first, she tried to brush it off as her imagination. She figured that it was just her nerves getting the best of her. But as the days went by, the feeling only got stronger. I tried to reassure her that it was just her imagination, but she was convinced that something was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off either. It was like there was a presence in the house that we couldn't see or understand. After 9 days of taking care of the family's house, Emily's parents called us and asked if we could go inside the house and turn off the automatic air conditioner. They had forgotten to turn it off before they left and were worried that it was using a lot of electricity. My wife and I were happy to help, so we made our way to the house. We walked up to the front door and glanced around, but there was no one in sight. We opened the door and stepped inside, immediately feeling the cool air of the air conditioner. We made our way to the thermostat and turned off the air conditioner, hoping that we had done the right thing. After turning off the air conditioner, I went to check inside the house for any water leaks. I walked through the rooms, checking for any signs of damage or moisture. I made my way through the house. Meanwhile, my wife was upstairs checking the bedrooms. She was walking down the hallway when she heard a strange sound coming from one of the closets. She paused, trying to figure out what it was. The sound was unclear, but it was definitely there. My wife walked closer to the closet and listened. It sounded like something was rustling inside. She wondered if she should go back and tell me, or if she should investigate on her own. In the end, her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to investigate the sound. My wife slowly opened the closet door, peering inside to see that the light in the back of the closet was on. It was a small dim light, but it was enough to see that the closet was empty. She noticed a string hanging in the middle of the room. It looked like it was attached to the light switch, so she assumed that it was the thing that's making the faint noise she heard. As my wife entered the closet and took the first few steps, she felt something cold brush against her ankle. She froze, wondering what it could be. She looked down and saw nothing there. She figured that it must have been one of the long dresses that was hanging in the closet, brushing against her legs. She walked over to the string and pulled it, turning off the light when suddenly she felt the cold brush against her ankles again. This time it felt like a small cold hand had grabbed her legs. She gasped and pulled away, trying to escape the cold touch. My wife ran out of the closet and back to the rest of the house, trying to escape the strange and eerie presence that seemed to be with her. She stumbled into the room where I was, and I could see from the look on her face that she was rattled up. She was panting and shaking, and she looked like she had just seen a ghost. I immediately knew that something was wrong. I took her hand and led her out of the house, promising that we would figure out what was going on later. We couldn't stay in that haunted house any longer, and I knew that we needed to get away from it or my wife was going to start panicking. We left the house immediately, without saying another word. We made our way back to our own home, feeling relieved to be out of that eerie and unsettling place. After we left the haunted house, my wife and I talked about what had happened in bed that night. We were both still shaken up and couldn't believe the strange and eerie events that had taken place. We agreed that we couldn't tell Emily's parents about what had happened while they were out of town. They were still grieving the loss of their daughter, and we didn't want to add to their burden. We decided that it was best to keep quiet about the strange and eerie events that had taken place in the house. We hoped that whatever was causing them would leave us alone, and that we would never have to experience anything like that again. After the strange and eerie events in the haunted house, my wife continued to experience strange occurrences. She would hear laughter or screams coming from the neighbor's house when she was alone, and it was clear that whatever was haunting the house was still there. We lived across from the house, and my wife would often see movement in the windows or shadows passing by. It was transparent that whatever was haunting the house was still there, and it was watching us. One morning I was out for work and my wife was home alone. She was sitting in the living room when she saw something strange out of the window. She looked outside and saw a young girl playing in the living room of Emily's house. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had never seen a child in the house before, and she didn't know what to make of it. She watched as the girl played, wondering who she was and why she was there. She noticed that the girl looked familiar, but she couldn't place where she had seen her before. As my wife watched the young girl playing in the haunted house, she suddenly remembered who the girl was. It was the same white young girl that Emily had seen before she died. My wife was shocked by this realization, and she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had always thought that Emily's visions were just a product of her illness, but now she knew that there was more to it than that. She was spooked by this realization, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. She looked around, trying to see if there was anyone else in the room with her. Suddenly, she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. She turned and saw that the girl from the house had walked out of view. She couldn't believe it. She had been so focused on the girl that she hadn't noticed her leaving. My wife was so scared by the strange and eerie events happening in their house that she felt like the little girl was now behind her, in our living room. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, and she knew that she had to get out of there as fast as possible. She quickly got into her car and started driving, hoping to put as much distance between herself and the house as she could. When she arrived at her sister's house, she was relieved to be somewhere safe. She explained everything that had happened to her sister, and her sister was shocked by the story. A few days later, Emily's family came back from their vacation. They thanked us for watching their house and for keeping their garden well and alive. We didn't tell them about the event until months later when we felt they were ready to hear what happened to my wife. 2 weeks later, when we felt like they were ready to hear what we experienced in their house, we sat down and explained about the strange stalking feelings, to the cold touch on my wife's ankle in their closet. Emily's father interrupted my wife with a look of shock and disbelief washed over his face. "You know," her father said, "Emily used to hide in the closet under the dresses and grab her mom's ankles to scare her." My wife's eyes widened, her mouth falling open in surprise. She brought a hand up to her cheek, as if to physically hold back the emotions that were threatening to overwhelm her. It was clear that she was struggling to come to terms with what she had just learned. Emily's mom said with a sad voice, "You saw my daughter. What did she look like?" I chucked out of fear to clear the silence in the room so we could start talking on a new topic. We finished dinner together, and they left home. A few years later, they moved away to another state, and we never heard from them since. They never really experienced anything in that house after the death of their daughter. It was a crazy experience and still creeps me out when I get home from work at night to see their house. A new family has moved in and lived there, but I still get the creepy stalking feelings over my shoulders, like Emily, and the ghost were by the windows lurking at us.